see? Are you with me? This is Bill. Harley. That's my name. Don't wear it out. That's what we used to say when we were kids. How are ya? Here we are. Day 19,000. I don't even know how many days it's been. So, I'm going to tell you a story. And the story is pretty long, so I decided I'm not even going to sing a song at the beginning. We're just going to get through this story, all right? And I'll check in to make sure you're watching, you know, and you can let me know on the Facebook if you're watching on Facebook. I guess you are, until later. You can watch this on YouTube later. Let me know you're with me, okay? If I ask you a question, give me an answer, right? So, this is a story about growing up. There's a difference between who we think we are and who everybody around us knows we are. It's a difference, and it's a good difference to learn. You should pay attention to what the other people are telling you about yourself. I learned this lesson for the first time. Some lessons you just keep learning over and over again until you actually really learn them. But I learned this the first time on my 5th grade field trip to the Indiana State House. I grew up on the north side of Indianapolis. Are you with me? I think I've talked about that before. But before I explain what happened on the field trip, I have to explain who I went on the field trip with. And some of you who have watched the other shows are already familiar with this person, my friend Glenn. So Glenn was somebody I hung out with a lot when I was growing up. And Glenn, well, you know, about Glenn, my mom would say, Glenn's a nice boy, but... And then she would stop. And she wouldn't finish the sentence. Because she wanted me to finish it. Because she didn't want to say anything unkind about my friends. Because she genuinely liked my friends. If today, in today's language, the way we talk about children, she might have said, Glenn's a nice boy, but sometimes he makes poor choices. I would have said, Glenn's a nice boy and he makes interesting choices, because he did. It was true that when I played with Glenn, things happened that didn't happen when I played with other friends. There were, you know, broken bones and broken windows and broken major appliances. It was just, but I don't really blame Glenn. I actually blame the geography. I blame where we were. It's always good to blame somebody else, don't you think? And especially, I blame Glenn's house. Glenn's house was awesome. It was enormous. So it was on the north side of Indianapolis. It was in the suburbs. Like, it was on these, you know, suburban, I mean, it was within the city, but still it was like, you know, kind of big yards. But it was the suburbs. But Glenn had a big yard and a big house, and there were a lot of kids in his family. Glenn had 3 younger brothers and sisters, and he had 3 cousins that lived with him too. When his aunt and uncle, when he was growing up and he was young, his aunt and uncle died in a car accident. And right away, his parents adopted his 3 older nephews and nieces. So there were 7 of them, 7 kids, right like that. And it was just a little too much for Glenn's mom. You know what I mean? I remember talking to a woman who was driving me around. I remember I was working in schools in Wisconsin, I think Manitowoc, and we were talking about having a lot of kids. And she said, yeah, you know, when we just had 1 kid, and even 2 kids, we could play man-to-man coverage. But we got that 3rd kid, we had to go to zone, and everything fell apart. And that's kind of what happened when there were 7 kids in the house. It was just too much for anybody to pay attention. And because there were so many kids in that house, kids are like magnets. Like it was like a black hole of gravity attracting other children. So all of us, all the kids in the neighborhood, and there were a lot, just kind of gravitated towards that area. And we actually called Glenn's parents Uncle Bud and Aunt Mary Ann, because that's what everybody else called them. And you never knew who, like, we walk in the house and Glenn's mom wasn't sure who you were, you know, but she might have seen you before, so it was okay. So it was kind of crazy. I remember once, Glenn's dad loved it. Glenn's mom, it was a little too much for her. But Glenn's dad loved it, because Glenn's dad was not there a lot. Glenn's dad was a doctor. He was a surgeon. He was a very well-respected surgeon. He worked at the Methodist Hospital in downtown Indianapolis. And he loved having a lot of kids around. As a matter of fact, one day I remember when we were in fourth grade, we were playing in the yard, and there were all these other kids running around, and we were shooting baskets in the driveway. And there were other kids running around. Someone was playing, there was a tetherball court, and people playing tag, and Glenn's brother, cousin Tommy, had just turned 16, and he just bought a car with his first job, and it was an old MG Midget. It was this cool little sports car. But the problem with MGs, and if you know anyone who's had one, you know this is true, is they never work. They're cool looking, and so you have to take them apart, and that's what he did. He took it apart, and it was strewn all across the yard, and he was trying to put it back together. And there were kids running around screaming, and there were dogs and animals. I'll talk about that more in a minute. And Mr. O'Connor, who lived next door, he came over, and Glenn's dad was kind of surveying his kingdom. And the next door neighbor came over, and he looked at everything going around. And he said, "You know, Bud," that was Glenn's dad's first name, "if you keep the kids off the lawn, you could grow some grass." And Glenn's dad looked out at all of his life, and he said, "Yeah, well, this year I'm growing kids. Next year I'll grow grass." And I was standing in the driveway when I heard that. And I thought, even at 9, that is amazing. When I look back at it now, I realized the whole thing was just kind of feral, wild. There were so many things going on, nobody could manage it. Now, that summer, the summer after fourth grade, which seems to be a summer when a lot of things happened to me. When I look back on it now, because I'm working on another story about something that happened in the fourth grade summer. That summer, Glenn and I discovered the beauty and the elegance of water balloons. Are you with me? I don't mean we didn't know about water balloons before. We'd known about them, but that summer we really experimented. They were so beautiful. I mean, you know, scientists describe potential energy as all the energy that's contained within a system ready to be used. And when I think of a water balloon, that's what I think of. You stick it under the faucet, you fill it up, you tie the knot, and you hold it in your hand, and it just trembles. Even if your hand is still, it just trembles with possibilities, with all the things that might happen, and you're holding it, and then, as if by magic, it says, "You have to throw me." And I say, "No, I don't." "Yes, you do." "No, I don't." "Yes, you do." "No, I don't." "Yes, you do." You can't help yourself. Oh, it's great. Oh, there was, you know, a bag of water balloons. It was like 79 cents. There were 100 water balloons. There were so many things we could do. And so that's what we did. So, of course, the first thing we did was we filled them in the kitchen sink. Because the kitchen sink, in case you children do not know, is the great laboratory experimenting place in a house. Right? That's where all those things take place. Maybe the bathroom, but it could be the kitchen sink because it's bigger. And we'd be filling up the water balloons, and Glenn's mom would come in and say, "Not in the house, not in the house," which is what she said, and my mom said, everybody said about everything. She said that about everything that morning, including us. And so we said, okay, so we went outside, and we turned on the outside spigots, and we filled them up, and then we threw them at each other, and we threw them against the garage, and we threw them when you tried to hit birds with them and all that stuff. And then we got a great idea. Now, a good idea is like the water balloon, but a great idea is when you combine two things that are not apparently related. And so that's when we got the idea about the roof. Are you with me? Yeah. So this house, it was this old Victorian house, so it had a lot of fancy little roofs and turrets and things, and Glenn's bedroom was this little turret that directly overlooked the front steps. So if you were very careful, and we were, because we were 9-year-old boys, you could open the window of his bedroom, and between the windowsill and the gutter, there were 3 or 4 courses of shingles. And if you were very careful, you could climb out there, perched there like a little suburban gargoyle, like that. So that's what we did. We climbed out there with a couple water balloons, and then we called out, "Philip!" Do you remember Philip? Yeah. Yeah. I'm wooing? Yeah, same one. Poor guy. Okay. "Philip!" And we heard the front door, the front screen open and shut. He was beneath us on the porch. "Where are you guys?" "Out here." And he came out and he stood there at the bottom step. "Where are you?" Right on his head. Oh, it was beautiful. It was perfect. But you know how little boys, little kids, little brothers and sisters are. He let out a scream that exceeded the signal to noise ratio. Now let me explain that, okay? In all of life, there is a background noise. We call that white noise. As a matter of fact, let's listen, because the air conditioner is on in here. Can you hear it? Are you with me? Okay. That's noise. That's called noise. And the signal is a thing that you actually really want to hear. So there's a thing called the signal to noise ratio, which is you got a background noise and the signal. And Glenn's mom was used to the noise, and it was a pretty high level. It was much louder than that air conditioner. But at a certain point, when the signal got louder than the noise, a lot louder, she paid attention to it. And that's what happened. When Philip screamed, "Mom!" she came out down the stairs, and there we were, holding a water balloon. She looked up, and we were caught. And she said, "You boys, don't throw those at people." And she went back inside. That was amazing. We realized a couple things right away. I mean, we realized that we could no longer throw them at Glenn's brothers or sisters, and certainly not his cousins since they were older. But we also realized that she had not mentioned being on the roof or the water balloons. Just don't hit people. So that was when we got the idea of pure genius. An idea of pure genius is when you take 3 things that are not apparently related and you put them together. So we had the water balloons and the roof, and that's when we got the idea about the goat. Yeah, are you with me? Do any of you out there have a goat? When I tell this story in schools or at shows, there's always some kid, no matter where I am, that has a goat. There are people who have goats right down the street from us, and I kept saying I wanted a goat, and my sons were going to buy me one for like Father's Day. But then my wife said, no. Debbie said, no goat, no goat. The goat was, they had all these animals at this house, even though it was in the suburbs. Even though they had a big yard, but it wasn't that big. But there were 2 or 3 dogs. They had a 125-pound basset hound that wandered the neighborhood and would eat absolutely anything, named Hannibal. They had a couple other dogs, and they had rabbits, and who knows how many cats they had. And they had all sorts of little furry rodents in cages. There were guinea pigs and gerbils and hamsters, and most of them had escaped. Or somebody had escaped. You wouldn't see them. I remember once we were eating lunch in the kitchen, and all of a sudden we saw this thing scurry, and they said, "Oh, look, there's Muffy. Yeah, we haven't seen her for days. We didn't even know she was alive anymore." And they got a pony. They had a pony. Yeah. They had a pony in a stall, and we used to ride it around the neighborhood and leave little deposits on people's front yards so the front for the yard could be fertilized. And then that summer, for a brief and shining moment, they had a goat. I saw Glenn's mom a couple years ago, before she died. She was quite old. And I said, "Marianne, do you remember the goat?" She was kind of sitting in a chair. She raised her head. She opened her eyes and she said, "That goat was a bad idea." So, I don't think she brought it home. I suspect Glenn's dad did. Driving home from the hospital. Said, "Oh, look, there's a goat. I think I'll bring it home." The goat was terrifying. The other animals were not terrifying. Even some of the dogs that nipped at you. But this is how a goat was terrifying. It was a billy goat. It was in a little fence, this little cheap little fencing they had. And you know how they used to say about people, he got a look in his eye? You know, he got one? No, this goat just had one. It had a look in his eye. It would just look at you. It would look at you with his beady eyes. And you'd go up and you'd put your hand there over the fence, and it would push against the hand. And then it had this thing that was very disturbing. It would kind of sniff and snort while it was doing that. And go, look at you with the eyes, and it would paw the ground. They're kind of thin and wiry. Their hair was bristly. And if for some reason you opened the gate, this horrible thing would happen. Because you'd be pushing at it, and you open the gate, and it would look at you. And you would take a step back, and it would take a step forward. And you would take a step back, and it would take a step forward, and would paw and glare at you with these yellow eyes. And then you took a step back and took a step forward and step back, and then you turned and started to run and went, ah! And it chased you around the house trying to butt you, and we ran around the house screaming, ah! It was terrifying, and we hated it, but we kept doing it because we were stupid. The goat was terrifying. The goat would chase us. So that's when we got the idea of genius, the goat. So one of us, to begin with, stayed up there on the roof, and the other one went down outside, went over, undid the latch, opened the gate, and said, "Here I come!" Started running around the house, the goat chasing, trying to bite him. And as it went by, as I took that water balloon, Glenn was running by, hit the goat right on the head. Oh my gosh, it was a new Olympic game. It was hilarious. The goat just shook it off and kept going. We played that for I don't know how long. We kept changing place. Everybody would get 10, each kid would get 5 or 10 throws, until finally we were running out of water balloons. We had this big thing of water balloons, and dozens lined up in the gutter just sitting there. And I was up there, and there were only a couple left, right? And I'd hit the goat, and the goat didn't care. And Glenn was running around the house. We were running in circles around the house. So you'd see the goat and Glenn every 30 seconds. And I got this idea, which is that the goat, at this point, was expecting the water balloon. But Glenn was not. Are you with me? Yeah. So I wanted to make sure I got this right. So I took that next to last water balloon out of the gutter, and I stood up because I wanted to really throw it. I was standing there, and I'm waiting, and I hear Glenn running around the side. "Here I come!" And he came under me, and I hit him right on the head. It exploded on his head. The goat butted him. He said, "You traitor!" and kept going around the house, the goat chasing him. I buckled over, laughing so hard. And as I buckled over, my sneakers slipped on the asphalt shingles, and my feet went out from under me, and I fell off the roof. I don't know if any of you have fallen off a roof before, but it's kind of funny what you think when you fall off the roof. You have a lot of time to think between the roof and the ground. More time than you would think. And my thought was, my mom's going to kill me. Which is a weird thing to think, since maybe I was going to die anyway in about 0.6 seconds. And I knew how my mom was going to kill me. My poor mom. I knew she was going to kill me about 10 o'clock to like 10 to 6. 10 to 6 in the evening, in the late afternoon, right before dinner. And she was going to kill me with an electric skillet. See, because here's what would happen at our house. My dad had a job in an office. He was an editor. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she was a writer, and she wrote in the basement. But her job, a large part of her job, was taking care of the house and cooking. And the truth was, when I look back on it now, I said, my mom didn't really like the housework. She wanted to be a writer, but there she was. And then she made a big mistake. She wanted to be a writer, but she had made a mistake. She had 3 boys. All right? And they were always there. And they were especially there late in the afternoon, because that's when everybody kind of loses it. That's why Mr. Rogers came on in the afternoon, you know, for those of you who grew up with Mr. Rogers, when people are really desperate and they don't know what to do. So, my mom hadn't been thinking about cooking, and about, you know, 5:45, my dad was going to come in and have a drink and say, what's for dinner? And she didn't know, so she'd say, oh my gosh, what am I going to make for dinner? So she would immediately go, she'd reach into the bottom drawer, and she'd pull out the Sunbeam electric skillet. She didn't know what it was going to be, but she was going to make it the skillet, and she would plug it in, then she'd take some Wesson oil, some vegetable oil, and pour it in there, and then it would begin to bubble, and she'd be standing there going, what am I going to make? What am I going to make? And then, 1 or 2 or 3 of her stupid sons would come in and do something stupid. Yes. They would ask her a question that didn't have an answer. They would complain. They'd say, Mommy, I can't find this. Mom, he did this to me. Mom, this is broken. Mom, what am I going to do? Mom, I don't want to eat that for dinner. Mom, Mom, Mom. And we would all be surrounding her going, Mom, 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 Mom. And she would raise the skillet and she'd say, I can't stand this. And we would scream and run out the door. Because we loved our mother. And we did not want her to hurt anyone, so she would be sent away. So, as I fell off the roof, that's what I thought. I imagined her coming over to Glenn's house, me lying there on the pavement going, with the electric skillet, fighting to do something like that. Well, I didn't hit the pavement. I didn't hit the flagstones. No, I fell in the pricker bush, which is right by the steps. And when I did, all the branches sticking in me and I was scratching, I let out this scream that exceeded the signal-to-noise ratio. Remember that? And Glenn's mom heard it. She came out the front door and found me stuck headfirst, my legs flailing up in the air, in the pricker bush. And she said, what happened? Now, that was a trick question. I mean, there was no good answer, right, to that. So I said what kids always say when the grown-ups ask them a question that they're afraid to answer because they know any answer they give is not going to be a good one. I said, I don't know. They said, how did you get in there? I don't know. Are you hurt? Oh, I don't know. She said, well, let me help you out. So she was trying to get me out of the pricker bush. And of course, that's when my mom came to pick me up. She came driving down their long driveway. And she stopped halfway down because she saw her son stuck in a pricker bush. And Glenn's mom either trying to put him in there or get him out, preferably the former, in my mom's opinion, I'm sure. So she jammed on the brakes. She threw open the door. She came running down the driveway. She said, what's wrong? What happened? What happened? I said, I don't know. And Glenn's mom said, I don't know. And my mother said, are you all right? Which is a great question on the part of a mother because it means maybe I won't kill you with a skillet. And I saw she didn't have one in her hand anyway. And I was trying to figure out what to say. I was like, and then we all heard, here I come! Yeah. Are you with me? We all turned and looked, and here he came, tearing around the side of the house. The goat chasing after him. And Glenn, as soon as he came around the house, headed for the front steps, he saw what was going on. He took it all in one glance. He understood what the problem was, and he just kept going. And the goat behind him, and they were gone around the side of the house. And the water balloon, the last one in the gutter, fell on the flagstones. My mom looked at me and she said, get in the car. I was picking the prickers out of my arms and I got in the car. And Glenn's mom and my mom, they stood about 10 feet apart from each other. And there was so much to say, not a word was spoken. I was in the car. My mom got in the car. She shut the door. She turned the car around in the driveway. She drove out the driveway. She pulled onto the street. She was gripping a hold of that steering wheel so hard her knuckles had turned white. I was waiting for her to yell at me, and she said, Glenn's a nice boy, but... I thought, right, it's Glenn's fault. Yeah. Okay, now, that explains that. But that's not what the story is about. That was just a little side thing. That's called character development. So you know who we're dealing with here, right? By the time Glenn and I got to 5th grade, we were not in the same class. We'd been separated. I don't know why. I was in Miss Wall's class. Miss Wall had been at that school forever. She'd been there at the foundation with Horace Mann, the foundation of the American educational system. And Glenn had Mr. Revis two rooms down. I would have Mr. Revis next year in 6th grade. He moved to 6th grade. And in between was kind of a buffer teacher, Ms. Delirious. And we were not allowed to be in the same class, I guess. Now that year, in 5th grade, we studied in social studies Indiana state history and government. We studied how it became a state and, you know, what happened to the native people that had been there, although we didn't learn it very well, what really happened. And we learned how the government was formed. We learned about the bicameral legislature and how laws were created and passed. And for that year, for the field trip in the spring, we were going to go to the Indiana State House and watch laws being made. Now, if you've been on the planet for a long time, you'll know that's not really that interesting. But don't forget, we were kids. We didn't care where we were going or what we were doing. It was a field trip, and we love field trips. Kids love field trips. Teachers aren't so sure, but kids love them because somehow the rules of behavior have been laxed. It's not quite clear who's in charge. And furthermore, there's all these other adults that are coming. The room moms and the room dads come on the trip too. And somehow the more parents there were, the more adults there were, the less supervision there was. So we liked it because the rules weren't clear. We liked it for 4 or 5 hours, and then after a while, we were ready to go back to being normal. But for that period, you could go anywhere. You know, the waste management plant. We would love to go to that if it's a field trip. Teachers don't feel that way at all. No. I mean, they know that children love them, but they're worried because they're taking their children, which they feel responsible for, out into the world, and the teachers are afraid that the children are going to do something stupid, that they're going to ask a really embarrassing question, or they're going to be there, they're going to break a mirror, or they're going to break something, or the thing that teachers are most afraid of is that they are going to leave someone behind. Leave no child behind. Perfectly good concept. Poorly acted out in law. But anyway, they were afraid that they were going to get back and they were going to count their kids and one was going to be missing and it was going to be their fault. So kids love field trips, adults not so much. So one day in the spring, I came into class early in the morning, got off the bus and I walked in and the class was abuzz. People weren't doing morning work. It's usually quiet when you come to a class. A teacher has them doing morning work. But people were out and they were talking. And there were other adults in the room. I said to a friend of mine, "What's going on?" And he said, "It's a field trip today. The State House." I said, "Oh, great. Yeah, I forgot. The field house. I love that." And Ms. Wall was sitting at her desk. She was calling children up, collecting their permission slips. And there was a mom wandering around the classroom. I shouldn't say wander. That was not the right verb for her. She was marching around the classroom with a clipboard. And she had already written people's names down. She was very officious because usually there is a mom in the classroom who doesn't like the way class is being run and she wants to assert authority and some kind of control in the classroom. And there's a field trip, so she's got to do that. So that's what she was doing. She was writing things down on a clipboard. Miss Wall called me up. I walked up to her desk. She said, "Hi, Bill." I said, "Hi, Ms. Wall." She said, "Can I have your permission slip?" I said, "I don't have it." She said, "Why not?" "I don't know." "Well, didn't your mom or dad sign it?" I said, "No." "Why not?" I don't know." I think maybe they didn't sign it because someone had not even given it to them. But I didn't see a point in bringing that up. She said, "Well, Bill, what am I going to do? Everybody else has signed theirs in." And Everybody's going to go, what am I going to do with you? And I said, I don't know. And just then, that officious mom, the one with the clipboard, had walked to the door of the classroom and said, everyone line up. Mrs. Wall looked up. Her power was being usurped by an interloper. She said, I can handle that, thank you very much. Everybody to the door. And she got up and she walked to the door of the classroom. And there I was, not knowing what to do. And I want to talk to the kids here right now. Maybe the adults remember this, but I'm going to tell you, when I was a kid, I felt like that a lot, not knowing what to do. Grown-ups would say, do this, and I wouldn't know how to do it. Or they'd say, everybody who knows about this, do this. And I wouldn't know about it. I know what to do about it. And I would stand there. It seemed like I spent most of my childhood not knowing what to do, but doing something that I was hoping was close enough to it. Hoping that I would do it well enough to not be noticed. And that's what I did. I kind of stood at the end of the line like I was kind of supposed to be in line. And one by one, the kids were filing out. And one by one, that officious mom was asking their names and checking her off the list, checking their names off the list, until she got to me. And she said, who are you? I said, I don't know. She said, are you going now? I said, I don't know. And Ms. Wall, she stepped in, and she put her hand on my shoulder, and she said, he's all right. Which is all any of us wants to hear. She said, Bill, you stand right here. We'll be right back. And she left me standing there in the hallway by the door of the classroom. And I knew what I was supposed to do. She told me exactly, stand there. So I stood there, waiting for Miss Wall to come back. And I waited and waited. And after a while, I started to look around, and I looked down the hallway. And there was someone standing outside Mr. Revis's hallway. And I bet you know who it was, because of everything I have talked about in the past half hour. Yeah, it was Glenn. Glenn was there. And I said, hey, Glenn. He said, hey, Bill. I said, what are you doing? He said, I forgot my permission slip. I said, I forgot mine. He said, Mr. Revis is going down, but he's going to come back and get me. I said, yeah, Ms. Wall's going to get me. And then he said, are you going? I said, I don't know. I hope so. He said, me too. He said, hey, Bill, do you have a partner? Because you know you have to have a buddy when you go on a field trip. I said, no, I don't. He said, let's be partners. Yeah. So we met in front of Mrs. Delirious' class. This was perfect. And we waited. But they didn't come back. And we didn't wait too long. We said, what if they forgot? We better go find them. Yeah, we better go down there right now. So we started to head down the hallway, out to the front, toward the front doors to the office. And just as we did that, Ms. Delirious, that buffer teacher, she came running down the hallway. She said she recognized us as some kind of 5th grade boys, but she didn't know, we weren't in her class. She said, what are you boys doing? We said, we don't know. She said, you're going to be late. You're going to miss the bus. I forgot my camera. You're going to have to come with me just a minute. She ran in her classroom. She came back with a camera. She grabbed us by the shoulder. She said, come on, boys, let's go. We said, okay. We ran down the hallway. We came out the door. And as we did that, we saw a bus pulling away. Ms. Delirious said, oh, the other classes are on those buses. It's just me on this one. I guess you're going to ride with me. I said, I guess we are. We were going. Who knew? We got on the bus and we realized a whole lot of things right away. I mean, we realized all our lives we'd been told we had to have permission to do things. We were going and we didn't have permission. This is great. We also realized, even though we had a buddy, we did not have a parent. Every parent that came was responsible for 6 or 8 kids. And you're assigned a parent who's in charge of you. But no one had been assigned to us. There was no one assigned to look out for us. We were feral. This was unusual. All the way down, we sang songs on the bus. We used to sing songs on the bus. And even Ms. Delirious sang along with, mine eyes have seen the glory of the burning of the school. We have tortured all the teachers and have broken all the rules. Gone into the office and killed the principal. The truth is... where else would a teacher sing about the destruction of the American educational system? Finally, after about a half hour, we got to downtown Indianapolis. And we pulled up along the Indiana State House. And we saw the kids from the first bus filing up the limestone steps, headed in. Ms. Delira stood at the front of the bus with the engine on, and she said, "Boys and girls, listen to me. I want you to be good citizens to show everyone that Delaware Trails Elementary School is the best school in the state. Keep your hands to yourselves." I said, "I could do that." "Stay with your parents." "I can't do that." "Stay with your buddies." "We can do that." "Bring your lunches." "Lunches?" I said to Glenn, "Did you bring a lunch?" He said, "No, I didn't know I was coming." So we filed out. When we got to Ms. Delira, she said, "You guys, you boys, catch up with your classes." So we scooted up the steps, and we came to the doors, and guess who was standing at the doors? The Cerberus! The three-headed dog! The officious mom with the clipboard. I was behind Glenn. I wanted him to do the fighting. She said, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm in Mr. Revison's class. We gotta go." She said, "All right." "He's my buddy." I slipped in behind him. We were free. So many things had to go wrong in order for them to go right. We walked down the long hallways, the marble floors, these huge arched ceilings. There was 75, 80 kids and 15 adults. We were all brought in to the rotunda. Every state house has a rotunda. And there, waiting for us, was our tour guide, Mr. Gray. Mr. Gray. He had gray hair and gray eyes and a gray suit and gray skin and a gray voice. There he spoke, and his voice just kind of drifted up. He said, his voice echoing up. Any questions? No! We didn't have any idea what he was talking about. We could barely hear him. Follow me, follow me. And he led us like a shepherd down this hallway. Kept pointing up to these huge murals, these huge portraits of these old white guys in black robes. Governor, Justice, any questions? No! Shh, shh. He led us over. We were all following behind him. Shh. And he points to this door. He said, "Office of the governor." The governor. Glenn said, "What's the governor?" I said, "It's like the principal. It's like the principal of the state." And we looked for the governor, but we couldn't see him. I guess he rarely came out. Right? And then he said, "Follow me, follow me." And he led us up these long sweeping steps onto another landing. And he pointed to these huge doors, 12 feet high, and leather-covered doors. He said, "Shh, shh, shh. Very quiet, very quiet. What's in regards to laws being made?" I said, "Cool." And he pushed open those doors, and everybody filed in. And Glenn and I were the last ones, and the doors closed behind us. And we looked down. We were on a balcony. Oh, kids love balconies. This was cool. Oh, I love balconies. And we looked down, and there on the first floor, there were all these desks and all these men. Some of them were sitting at desks, but others just wandering around. And there was a man in the front of the desk, and he was speaking on a microphone, and his voice was just drifting up too. Sounded like Mr. Gray. I said, "What's he doing?" He said, "That's how laws are made," Glenn said. I said, "Wow." We stood there at the top with the doors just closed. There were no seats for us. Glenn said, "Man, I love balconies. I wish I had a water balloon. Perfect place for a water balloon." We stood there, waiting for the laws to be made. But the man just droned on. Then someone else droned on. I thought, where are the laws? Where are they being made? And then Glenn said, "I gotta go to the bathroom." And I said, "I do too." at the very thought of it. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you're with me. If I say, do you have to go to the bathroom? You might be thinking that right now. But don't, because I'm telling a story. Okay? I said, I really got to go. He said, so do I. He said, I think I know where one is. I said, so do I. We looked around to get permission, but there was Ms. Delirious right in front of us, but she was not our teacher. And there was that officious mom with the clipboard. And we had learned early in our childhood to never ask someone who might say no. Ms. Wall and Mr. Revis were in the next aisle. We couldn't get to them. Glenn said, it's okay. I know where it is. So without asking permission, because we'd done so well so far, we slipped out the doors. Glenn said, I think it's over here. No, it wasn't. I said, no, I think it's over there. It wasn't. Glenn said, over here. It wasn't. I said, over there. It wasn't. Fifth grade boys are full of answers, and none of them are right. Glenn said, we better go downstairs. I really got to go now. I said, I do too. So we went downstairs. We went downstairs. We walked around the first floor looking. We walked by the office of the governor. I said, Glenn, look! What? I pointed. There was someone standing there at the entrance of the door of the governor. I said, that's him! He said, how do you know? I said, that's what they look like. But still, no bathroom. Now we really had to go. We turned and looked. We saw some stairs leading down and an arrow pointing down that said restrooms. Finally, we went all the way down. We went into the men's room, and everything in the men's room was enormous. These huge stand-up places to go to the bathroom. I said, oh man, my mom would love this. You cannot miss in these. We finished. We flushed the toilet, water pouring out, just like another story I might have told you. We came out, and I was about to go upstairs when Glenn said, Bill, look! Looked, and over there was like a snack bar, a little canteen. And he said, we don't have any lunch, but I have a quarter. Everyone else was going to have lunch. We had to have lunch too. This made perfect sense. We went and stood there in line. And when it was our turn, Glenn held out the quarter and said, what can I get for a quarter for us? And she said, oh boys, not much. And then a voice from behind us spoke and said, give these boys a couple hot dogs. Some French fries, too. We turned and looked. It was the governor! It looked like the governor. And right then, even knew if it wasn't, it was a better story if it was. He said, you boys, you get some of these hot dogs, and you take some of that ketchup and that mustard and the relish, you put everything, you come on, sit over here by me. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So I usually just put mustard, but I put everything on. This is great. Free lunch. I love the government. Put on mustard, I put on ketchup, I put on the pickle relish, which I didn't even like, but I didn't care because it was all free. We sat down, we stuffed the French fries in our face, we started to eat the hot dogs, and he said, where are you from? And we said, we're from Delaware Child Elementary School. He said, what are you boys doing here on this fine day? I said, we're watching laws being made. He said, really? How do they do that? And we said, oh, and we explained it to him. And he said, you boys, I have never heard it explained so clearly. I think somebody around here ought to listen. You boys are very intelligent. No one ever had called us intelligent before. And he said, let me tell you about your house. I said, have you been to my house? He said, no. This is your house. I never knew. And he told us about how it was built and how long it had been around and what happened here and some of the amazing things that had happened, the famous people who had spoken and passed through. It was the best history lesson I ever got. But now I was getting nervous. I said, I think we have to go. Glenn said, yeah, we better go. And he said, you boys, you go up, you go back to where you're going, but you come here anytime you want. You come in and see me, okay? We said, okay. We got out of the canteen. We ran up the steps from the basement on the first floor up to the second landing. We came to those big doors. We pushed the doors open, and we looked down, and our hearts stopped because there was a class there, and it was not ours. It was another class. We ran down the steps. We ran out the front steps of the State House, and we saw our buses pulling away. And I thought, my mom's going to kill me. We went back in the State House. And now all these people wandering the halls. They seemed like zombies just wandering around, squeaking handcarts, carrying thousands of piles of paper. Maybe when you kids will get older, you'll read something by Kafka. Years later, I would read something by Kafka, and I thought, the Indiana State House. And we came into the rotunda, and there was Mr. Gray, just finishing a talk to another school group. And he saw us, and we went over to him, the only person we knew at the State House other than the governor. And he said, "Follow me, boys." And he took us to his office, and he made a phone call. Now, are you with me? I wasn't on the bus. No, I wasn't on the bus. But I understand what happened. Steve Hawley was sitting behind Ms. Wall. Miss Wall was sitting in the front seat, and Mr. Evans was all the way in the back, right? And at a certain point, after about 5-10 minutes, Steve tapped Ms. Wall's shoulder and said, "Ms. Wall." She said, "Yes, Stephen." "Bill's not here." You can see her go alert, right? You can see her mind working. Can't imagine going, "Bill, Bill." No permission slip, right? At the classroom door. "Yeah? Was that Bill? Was that Bill in the State House?" It couldn't have been. So she said, "No, Stephen, I don't think he came." And Stephen said, "Oh, yes, he did." She stood up and she looked out across the bus. Just at the same moment, Mr. Evans was standing in the back, and their eyes met, and they knew they had done it. They had left children behind. But way back then, because I'm so old, there were no cell phones. There was nothing to be done but ride that bus all the way back to the school. And before they got back, the phone call had been made from Mr. Gray. And Mr. Olenek, the vice principal in charge of discipline, got into his old station wagon, and he drove it all the way back downtown. And we sat there for what seemed like forever, kicking our legs because the chairs were too high for our legs to reach the ground. Mr. Olenek came in Mr. Gray's office, looked down and saw us, and said, "What am I going to do with you boys?" And we said, "We don't know." He said, "Get in the car." And we did. He opened the back door of his car, and I must confess, even today, I was a little disappointed in his car. You would think a vice principal might be driving a fancy limousine, but it was a car. It was an old station wagon with rusted wheel wells, and he had to take these files out of the back seat and put them in the far back. And I sat behind him, and Glenn sat next to me, and we drove home. And I remember looking at Mr. Olenek's neck. He had a thick neck. I was looking at the folds. And I started to think about what had happened. And I thought about what my mom said, Glenn being a nice boy, and I saw that my mom was right. That I was all right. That I was a nice boy. It was only when I was with Glenn that things went wrong. Otherwise, I was fine. I saw that at every turn, when something had gone wrong, Glenn had led me astray. It was him. And I realized if I was going to live and grow up, I could not play with him and I couldn't hang out with him because all these terrible things happened. And I decided I just needed to tell him right now. The more I thought about it, the more I said, I've got to end this right now. So I turned to him and I looked at him. I said, "Glenn!" And Glenn wasn't even looking at me. He was looking out the window, probably dreaming of some other thing that he wanted to do that was horrible, that was going to get us both in trouble. I said, "Glenn!" But he didn't look at me. I said, "Glenn!" "Hey, Glenn! Glenn!" Finally turned and looked at me. He rubbed his eyes. He'd been crying. Glenn never cried. I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "Nothing." I said, "What is it?" He said, "No." I said, "What is it?" He said, "I can't tell you." I said, "What? Tell me." He said, "My mom told me I'm not supposed to play with you." "Play with me?" She says every time I play with you something bad happens, so I shouldn't be playing with you. What? No! It's when I play with you the bad thing happened. He said, no, it's you. I said, no, it's you. He said, you broke the window. I said, you gave me the rock. I said, you painted the cat. You gave me the paint. We argued back and forth and all these things, all this list of years and years of things that we had done that had made people furious. It's you, it's you. And a voice in the front said, be quiet. It takes both of you. It takes both of you to do this. Now you be quiet and think about what you have done. And I want to tell you, it was like the scales fell from my eyes. And I saw things. I was like, oh. That was the first time, really, I saw who I was. Yeah. It's like I said to my boys, you know? I said, one boy by himself has a brain. Two boys together each have half a brain. Three boys together have lost their minds. I saw what it was. Yeah. I saw that when I was by myself, I was a nice boy. But when I was with Glenn, I was a nice boy, but. And that is that. Okay, so listen. Whoa. You know, it's funny when you tell a story because there's always a possibility of something new happening. And I think I said things today that I have never said before because the pictures are in your head, you know. So listen to me. I want to say a couple things. The stories are up. You can watch them again on Facebook Live. You can watch them on YouTube. And you can look at all the past months of shows I've done. If you want to make a little donation, you went to a show and want to pay for it, you go to my webpage, billharley.com, and you click on the mini page. There's a thing you can, kind of like a little tip jar, you can put a couple bucks in there. That would be great. And I can't not thank those of you who have contributed over the past couple months. So I want to tell you, I've been thinking about this, and I'm going to do one more week of shows, and then I'm going to stop for a while. I want to look at the material I've got and think about other things to do, but I have a lot of other work that I have to do. I'm working on editing a book, and I'm working on some recordings, and I think where we're probably headed is, before COVID-19 showed up, I was in the process of developing a podcast, which is going to be of my stories, that you could download and listen to whenever you wanted. A lot of the stories I've told, but a lot of other ones, some I haven't recorded, some I have. And my thought was to do that. I thought we were going to be doing that this summer, but not much we've planned on happening has happened in the way we thought. And this is one of the lessons that we're learning. This is what normal is us being with us here together. So I'm going to be working on that. So I'm going to do 2 more shows. I'm going to do a show next Tuesday and next Thursday. Next Tuesday, I will tell you, I'm going to tell Bucket of Beans, Clarice, and the Bubble Machine. UW's going, ooh, which I do not regularly tell, but a lot of people have asked about it, and I know on my recording Town Around the Bend, it's one of the favorite stories, so I'm going to work on telling that next Tuesday. And then Thursday, I haven't decided yet. We'll see. I've still got a bunch of other things I could do. So what I'd love to have you do is I want you to know about the podcast. It's going to be called Song, Story, and Stuff. We already have some logos and stuff and seasons planned out. I just have to do the work on them. If you go to my webpage and you sign up, I'll let you know about that. I'm going to have to do a little fundraising for it, probably a Patreon or something, to get the whole thing going. Not too much, but we'll need some help to do that, and then it'll be up. So that's what I'm going to be working on. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. I love doing these, and we'll see what the next thing is. So I'll see you next Tuesday. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. See you later.